Hello and welcome to Narayana IS. I am Pratik, your faculty for daily news analysis. Students, in today's DNA session, we are going to focus on five most important topics from the Hindu newspaper. Right, before we begin with the analysis of five topics, let us go through a motivation quote, as motivation is important for surviving or going through this sort of difficult process, cumbersome process, right? So, what is today's motivational quote? It always seems impossible unless it is done. Whenever you start or whenever you try to do something new, something challenging, it seems impossible. But the moment you start doing it, it seems possible. So, no matter how difficult the task is, the moment you start, working on it, gradually you'll gain the confidence, and at one stage you get the confidence that you'll clear, or rather you'll complete or achieve that task. So don't get bogged down because of the huge syllabus of UPSC CS examination. Don't get bogged down. Do not be under any sort of pressure because of the humongous syllabus of the UPSC examination. The moment you start preparing for the examination, the moment you achieve small targets, this will help you to gain confidence, and this confidence will help you clear the examination. Right? So, those students who want to, start the preparation, right? Narayana IS has introduced 1 year and 2 year prelims come means integrated course, right? For all those ones who are interested, can enroll in our 1 year and 2 year course. So you can see a QR scan QR code on your screen. Please scan the QR code, right? And please fill in the details. Our team will get back to you with all the necessary or required information. And again, once you be a part of our course, will help you with each and every stage, right? Prelims means interview, will help you with the test, will help you how to approach each and every subject, how to tackle the challenges, life challenges, right? So now, these are the five topics that we shall be discussing in today's DNA. The first topic is taken from Hindu page number 8. Now, this talks about the dangerous illusion cast by development findings. So, this article tries to highlight the fact that how the human development indicator does not capture the true essence of development. Especially why? Because the human development indicator or index does not focus on the damage done on the environment, or does not take into consideration the environmental degradation, or let's say the material footprint of the countries before ranking, right? So in this article we discuss the human development indicators and the flaws in the ranking, right? And then the possible solution. The second article is taken from Hindu page number 1, right? This article talks about retail inflation. So, in this article, we discuss what is retail inflation, what is consumer price index, what is wholesale price index. So, these are the key terms that you need to understand in the second article. The third article is taken from Hindu page number 10. Now, this article highlights that how fortified grain scheme is important to address the malnutrition challenge, or challenge that majority of people of our country, especially the people who are vulnerable or marginalized, are facing, right? So we'll understand what is this fortified food scheme. And fourth article is taken from Hindu page number 12. Now in this article we shall be understanding what is this APAAR ID system. So we are going to discuss about this system, right? And the fifth article, we are going to understand the government of India's mission Amrit Sarovar. So these are the five articles that we shall be discussing in today's DNA, right? So on this note, let us get started with the first article. The title is The Dangerous Illusion cast by development rankings. In this article, we shall understand the flaws of human development indicator and the need for sustainable alternatives. And this you may map under GS paper 3, that is conservation, environment, pollution and degradation. Now a question was asked on the Human Development Index in the year 2019, that the Human Development Index has been criticized on various grounds. Critically examine the inherent limitations of the HDI in measuring human development. So the topic pertains to the Human Development Index, the ranking it publishes and the flaws in it, and the sustainable alternatives to the Human Development Index. Now, what is the context? Now, the Human Development Index, the Human Development Index, right? This index, it measures development based on what? It measures development based on life expectancy. It measures development on life expectancy, then education, we have education, income. This is how it measures development, but it does not consider environment sustainability. The environment factor is completely missing in the Human Development Indicator. For example, the countries who rank good in the human development indicators, for example, we have Norway, we have Switzerland, we have Ireland. So these countries who rank high in the human development index, they use excessive resources. And because of the resources they have used, it is worsening the climate change. So these countries have achieved development how? By extracting the resources. The resources belong to the entire world. Now to address this challenge, we have planetary pressure adjusted HDI. What? Planetary adjusted HDI. Planetary adjusted HDI. This was introduced to address the challenge. But still, despite the fact that an alternative was, let's say, started, this is still not enough, this is still not adequate. And then this raises concerns about unsustainable growth. We are witnessing growth, but the growth is unsustainable. That's the reason we need better development models, especially for countries as big as India, China, or let's say Pakistan. We need better development models. This is the context. Now let us try to understand, the topic in depth. Now, rethinking development metrics. So, which should be the metrics on the basis of which we can measure development? The flaws of HDI and the needs for sustainable alternatives. Right now, we have discussed so far that the HDI, it measures national progress, but it fails to consider the impact of, let's say, development on environment. Countries like the so-called the advanced countries, the developed countries, they have consumed excessive resources, and this has resulted in creating a false perception of development. They have consumed excessive global resources, and this, the development that these countries see, is resulting in creating a false perception of development. So if every nation followed the way the developed nations have grown, let's say for example the developing countries, or let's say the poor countries, if they start following the way the developed countries have, let's say, grown or developed, then we would need maybe 3 or 4 earths, multiple earths to survive. One earth won't be sufficient if we are to follow the pattern that the developed countries have followed. And this flawed measurement, the measurement or the development that the developed countries have seen, it misguides the policy makers in developing countries like India. It promotes unsustainable growth rate, which means it would be foolhardy to follow the developmental models the developed countries have followed. In that case, we may require multiple earths so that multiple earths could withstand the pressure created on environment by the society, the world society, so to say. And that's the reason we have the planetary pressure adjusted human development index. So what exactly is this planetary pressure adjusted human development index? The PHDI. See, the PHDI, that is planetary pressure based adjusted human development indicator. It modifies, what it does is it modifies the human development index. How does it modify? By including a country's carbon dioxide emission. What? By country's carbon dioxide emission, as well as the material footprint. The material footprint, which means material footprint per capita. It should be per capita. So it is including the carbon dioxide emission emitted by each and every country and the material footprint per capita. Per capita, which means uh, how many or how much resources did one person utilize. For example, let's say I'm a human being and how much resources have I utilized? Raw material. For example, let's say I'm wearing a watch. So what are the raw material used? I'm wearing a shirt. I'm wearing a specs. This is a pen, right? So per person, how much resource a person is using? This PHDI model, it modifies HDI by including the environmental cost as well. It highlights the dangers of unsustainable resource use and poor environmental management. So by considering the stress on the environment, this PHDI, it shows how unchecked development, if the development is not checked, it can harm the long-term progress. It can harm the long-term progress, and this emphasizes the need for sustainability in measuring growth. In short, to consider the impact of development on environment, or the objective is to reduce the environmental footprint. So this is what we understand by the PHDI model. I hope you understood what is PHDI and how it is different from the HDI. Now, what is the impact of planetary adjustment, right? See, when planetary pressure is factored in the human development indicator, the world average HDF fell from 0.7 to 0.6 when the environmental factor is also considered. For example, average per capita CO2 emissions, right, is 4.6 tons globally, and material footprint per capita is 12.3 tons globally. This figure was adjusted or was considered in the HDI. Now, if these factors are considered, then Norway, which ranked first in HDI, it fell 15 places, which means it shows the extent to which Norway used the global resources. Then United States, 17, dropped 45 places. It again shows the extent to which USA has extracted the global resources. Canada, China, Luxembourg, Switzerland, all this sort of developed and developing nations, their ranks have dropped. Why? Because the environmental cost was factored in. Talking about India, India's rank is slightly lower. Slightly lower. What does it mean? That a country like India did not extract resources to the extent that the developed countries have. To the extent the developed countries have. Now, what are the shortcomings of PHDI? What are the shortcomings? One, it is relative, not absolute benchmark. Why? Why is it said that it is relative? See, PHDI ranks countries based on their performance relative to others. Based on the performance relative to others rather than against a fixed ecological threshold. This means that even nations with unsustainable consumption pattern may still rank high simply because other countries perform worse. For example, Nordic countries, the so-called Nordic countries, now these countries are often associated with development. These Nordic countries continue to score well. Why? They have consumed, extracted a lot of resources. Right now, some say, or some sort of scholars or experts suggest that the Nordic countries have extracted resources equivalent to 5 Earths per capita. It highlights a limitation of this approach. Why? Because relatively, PHDI is ranking the countries based on their performance. So, for example, if this country is performing this much, and if you are performing better, then this country is ranked better than the other country. The ranking should be actually based on fixed ecological threshold. But here, the ranking is based on the performance relative to other countries. That's the reason this is not an absolute benchmark. The next, limited reflection of true sustainability. Now, this index does not fully capture the reality of sustainability. Why? Because as some high income nations continue to dominate the rankings despite their excessive resource extraction or consumption. Norway, for example. Now, this country only dropped 15 places in the last slide we saw. It only dropped 15 places despite its significant environmental footprint. And countries with already low environmental impact saw little improvement in their standings. Now, this raises concerns about whether the index truly reflects sustainable development, and the answer is not entirely. Then it does not fully address climate justice. Now, PHDA, yes, we have discussed that it accounts for the current per capita emissions, that is the material footprint per capita, but it does not consider the historical emission. It does not consider the historical emissions. Now, these historical emissions, they are actually a key factor in climate justice. The developed nations have contributed disproportionately to environmental degradation. But unfortunately, it is the developing nations that suffer the most because of the climate change. So, by focusing only on the present day footprints, the PHDI, it overlooks the long-term responsibilities of the developed nations, because it is the responsibility of the developed nations to help the developing countries to, let's say, uh, to incorporate new technologies to reduce environmental footprint. For that, the developed countries have to fund the developing countries. So these are some of the shortcomings of PHDI. Now, which are the other challenges in addressing the environmental and developmental concerns? One, the overconsumption by the developed nations, which means that the developed nations have historically overused global resources. And this exceeds the limits or the planetary limits in areas such as carbon emission, the biodiversity laws, and pollution. Now, despite being among the largest contributors to climate change, who the developed countries? The developed countries continue to be viewed as an aspirational model for developing countries. And this actually reinforces what? The unsustainable development patterns. Why? Because the emerging nations or the developing nations tend to follow the model that the developed countries have followed. Then climate injustice and the burden on the globe. Now, global south is often associated with the developing countries, or let's say poor countries. Now, the global south, they have contributed the least to climate change, but still it faces the worst consequences. For example, the rising temperature, then extreme weather events, the resource depletion. For example, India, which is a developing nation, has to find a way, has to balance economic growth with environmental sustainability. However, unfortunately, they often do so under pressure, which means the developing countries are always under pressure from the developed nations, right? Because the developed nations want the developing countries to reduce environmental footprint. So the pressure is on the developing nations. Then climate finance and historical responsibility. Now, despite commitments under the Conference of Parties Agreement, that is the Paris Agreement, the developed nations have consistently failed to fulfill their climate finance promises. There's a growing demand for climate reparations, and then there is also growing demand for the establishment of what? Loss and damage fund. What? Loss and damage fund. Why? To compensate the developing countries, or let's say the poor countries facing the disaster induced because of the climate. Now, without sufficient financial support, the developing nations, they struggle to implement the climate resilient policies. Why? At the same time, they also have to meet their developmental goals. So the developing countries are finding it difficult. Why? Because lack of financial support. So these are some of the challenges. Now let's discuss about India. Let us discuss about the challenges that India is facing. Now, if we talk about India, right? India's resource utilization remains inefficient, but the environmental issues continue to worsen. The large scale projects are pursued with minimal consideration for their ecological impact. Many ongoing and let's say the proposed initiatives, they threaten the biodiversity and the natural ecosystem, and this reflects weak prioritization of environment sustainability in, let's say, in the development planning in the development planning. Now, if I talk about the high multidimensional poverty rates, now 27.9% of India's population falls under the multidimensional poverty index. Now the figures, they range from 1% in Kerala and 52% in Bihar. A large section of this population depends directly on natural resources for survival, and this makes it difficult to prioritize environment conservation over, let's say, the pressing economic needs. The other challenge is unattended environmental and social issues. Now, India highlighted the dual challenges of one, the elevation is one challenge, the other one is environment protection. environment protection. So India has highlighted these two challenges. At the 1972 Stockholm Conference on the Human Environment, yet the issue has remained unresolved. Even after 5 decades later, the situation has grown even more complex, and this actually focuses or necessitates a policy shift that integrates the environment sustainability with the social and, let's say, economic development. Then the ineffectiveness of these stand-alone environmental movements. For example, India has seen some great environment-based movements like the Chipko movement in Uttarakhand, where the women actually clung the trees, they hugged the trees so as to stop the trees from cutting down. Or let's say we also have this Silent Valley movement in Kerala. These environment-based movements, they have played a crucial role in promoting environment awareness. However, such isolated events or isolated efforts are not sufficient, because if we are to address the large scale challenges of, let's say, the hundreds of years of damage to environment, then we need a long term solution. We need a more holistic and institutionalized approach. We have to incorporate climate resilience, sustainable development, equitable resource distribution. We have to integrate all this thing into the governance and, let's say, the policy frameworks. What about the solution? Rethinking development, integrating environment and social sustainability. So the first one is intertwining environmental and social development. Now, human development is closely linked to the Earth's ecological system, isn't it? It makes it essential to adopt a systematic approach that integrates economic, social, and environment factors. The biosphere based approach, the biosphere based approach is necessary, which means in this approach, nature based solution focus on people while ensuring the sustainable use of resources. It focuses on people while ensuring sustainable use of resources. The current economic development models like the GDP, or let's say the human development indicators, they actually fail to account for environment sustainability and let's also the social equity, right? And actually this leads to incomplete and often misleading measure of progress, right? The second is need for new development metrics, which means the HDI, GDP, they only focus on economic growth and income, right? They ignore very large aspects of, let's say, well-being, environment sustainability. So the future development metrics must integrate health, resource equity, environment justice, so as to provide a more holistic assessment of human progress. Sustainable development indicators. Sustainable. Now, these sustainable development indicators, right, they should actually ensure that economic advancement does not come, right? Economic growth does not come at the cost of degradation to the environment or let's say social inequality. Then what are the alternative indices for measuring development? What are the alternative indices? Now, several alternative indices, they offer a more comprehensive evaluation of progress. For example, we have the genuine progress indicator. Now, this indicator adjusts GDP by including what? Social and environmental cost. Social and environmental cost. It is not only focusing on GDP, but it it is also focusing on the social and economic costs, and this provides a more realistic measure of economic growth. The next is the Happy Planet Index. Now this, it assesses well-being. What it does is it assesses well-being while factoring in resource consumption and sustainability. It ensures that the development remains both people centric and environmentally responsible. Then the ecological footprint index, it tracks how much biocapacity a country consumes relative to its available resources, which means it offers insights into the pressure on the planet and the sustainable living as well. So these are the better indices that we can use to replace the human development index. Then India's path to sustainable development. Okay. Now, a country with a population of 1.4 billion, India cannot afford to follow the high consumption model of the developed nations, which means India has to carve a unique development model that should balance what? Economic growth, environment sustainability, and most importantly, social justice, so as to ensure long-term resilience. Long-term resilience. So, key policy directions. Now, India's sustainable development strategy, right, must focus on renewable energy expansion. Renewable energy expansion. We have to focus on solar, wind, and hydropower to reduce dependency on the fossil fuel. Then a circular economy and resource efficiency approach. Now, this circular economy approach, what is it? This approach is necessary to promote waste reduction. You have to reduce the waste, and the waste that we have has to recycle, and most importantly, we have to ensure that we approach towards resource efficient nation. Then strengthening the local resource management. How? Through community led conservation and sustainable agriculture. By focusing on community led conservation, right, we can ensure better environmental outcomes. Then the economic policies, right, economic policies must also they should be designed to balance growth with ecological limits. That is, while staying within the ecological limits, thereby preventing environmental degradation. Thereby preventing environmental degradation. And then we have other solution like the global south versus the global north. Now, global north, we have discussed that it is associated with the developed nations, which means the developed nations, despite being the largest consumers of global resources, they continue to urge the developing countries to cut emissions without acknowledging their historical contribution. So the climate agreements must recognize historical responsibility and ensure that the developed nations contribute fairly to the global sustainability efforts. Right? Then next we have the ethical considerations, that is development with justice model, which means the sustainable development that we talk about, it must be economically viable, which means we have to ensure social justice, right? Then we also need to take into account the past injustices. For example, the colonial era resource extraction and also the corporate exploitation. These must be addressed when we make policies for equitable and sustainable growth, which means the developing countries especially. In developing countries, the development should focus on the marginalized communities and ensure that the economic benefits they are distributed fairly among each and every section of the society. Talking about the role of local level involvement. Now, when a true sustainable approach must integrate social, economic and environment challenges rather than addressing them separately. Decentralized governance, which means giving power to the local people. For example, India has 73rd and 74th Constitution Amendment Act, through which India decentralized governance, and this led to the let's say establishment of the Panchayati Raj institution and the municipalities. This decentralized governance, it empowers the local people to implement the policies which are sustainable, right? Now, it is very important to strengthen the local institutions and the efforts undertaken by the communities. Why? Because this can enhance the effectiveness of the nature-based solutions in tackling the environmental challenges. Next, we have the collaborative efforts of the government, institutions, and technology. Most important is technology, which means we are witnessing advancement in the earth science system, right? Uh, then the sustainable research, remote sensing, the geographical information system technology, all this have played a very important role in monitoring and reducing the human impact on the development technology. So collaboration between the natural and social sciences is very important to make policies, and these policies should balance what human development with the environment sustainability. And that's the reason it is important that we move towards what? We move towards scientific evidence based decision making, decentralized governance, and then institutional coordination is also very necessary to efficiently manage the stress on the environment. Then we'll focus on what the 2020 Human Development Report has recommended. Social norms and values. Now see, a fundamental shift in social norms and values is required. Why? To promote the environmental balance alongside economic growth, right? So social norms is important, which means the government must introduce what incentives and regulation, right, that reward sustainable practices while penalizing environmental degradation. The policies that the government frames should also prioritize nature based solutions, right, such as, let's say, ecosystem restoration, sustainable resource management, right, and then the community led conservation efforts. This creates a positive feedback loop between the human well-being and the environment sustainability. So these are some of the solutions that we can think of, right? And then conclusion, it's the same summary of, which means the essence is that we have to move towards nature-based solution. We have to ensure that the human development indicator, which only focuses on, let's say, this the economic growth, this approach has to be changed to take into consideration the environmental factor as well, which means development without considering the social and environmental sustainability will only harm our future, right? I hope you understood the first topic. Let us focus on the second topic. Second topic talks about retail inflation. Now, questions have been asked on inflation many times in the UPSC examination. So, this was a question asked in the year 2015. What is the context? The retail inflation has dropped to a 7-month low, and this marks the fourth consecutive month of declining inflation. What is retail inflation? Retail, which means the things that we buy from the shopkeepers. Let's say we are going to a grocery shop, a vegetable shop, a fruit shop and buying something. This is retail, which means the prices of the retail goods and services have come down. This is what the context is. Now, what are the current trends? Retail inflation is measured by the consumer price consumer price index. This fell to 3.6 percentage, right? This marks the first time inflation has been below 4 percentage since July 2024. Now, this decline is attributed to falling food prices, which means the food prices are falling, which is a good news, especially in the vegetables, pulses and eggs. Now, in this article, it is important to understand certain key terms like CPI, CFPI, wholesale price index and the GDP deflator. Let us try to understand these terms one by one. Now, the first one is consumer price index. Now, this CPI, it tracks price changes in goods and services. It tracks price changes in goods and services. What in goods and services? These goods and services are commonly consumed by the households. The National Statistics Office, NSO, it releases CPI report monthly. Every month CPI report is released. And this CPI, right, it plays a very important role in shaping the monetary policy decisions. And who makes the monetary policy decisions? It is the Reserve Bank of India. For example, whether to reduce the repo rate or whether to increase the repo rate. So, how the RBI decides? On the basis of such indicators, on the basis of such report. The next we have is the Consumer Food Price Index. Consumer Food Price Index. Now, this it measures inflation only in the food items, only in the food items. Now, the food items, they are often volatile. Why? Because of, let's say, seasonal variation. There's supply chain disruption because of, let's say, Russia-Ukraine war, or let's say there's no rain, that is weather-related factors. Now, since the food inflation directly affects the household expenses, it is very closely monitored by the policymakers. Next, we have the wholesale price index, which means now this wholesale price index, it tracks inflation at the producer level, at the producer level, which means it measures the wholesale price changes before the goods reach the consumers, before the goods they reach the consumers. Now, unlike CPI, CPI focuses on the retail prices. The W wholesale price index, it reflects the cost variations for businesses and industries. Producer, who produces? The businessmen and the industries. Now, this actually is a key indicator. WPI is a key indicator for the supply side inflation trend. Supply side, who is supply? The industries and the businesses are supply. So, this is wholesale. The next is the GDP deflator. Now, GDP deflator, which means, now this is a broad measure of the price changes across all the goods and services produced within an economy. The goods and services produced within an economy. Now, unlike CPI and WPI, right? This GDP deflator, it includes both the consumer and the producer prices. CPI focus on consumer, WPI it focus on producers. This it includes both the consumer and the producer prices, which means it provides a more comprehensive view of the inflationary trends over time. This is what is, these are the four key terms that you need to understand. Now these are some statistics, right? There's nothing much to explain here. So I request you to please read by your own these statistics, right? You can download the DNA link. The DNA link is in the comment section. Please open the DNA link and please go through these statistics. Now, the RBI's inflation target, the Monetary Policy Committee, right, of the RBI aims to keep the inflation at 4%, which means RBI intends to keep the inflation at 4%. This is what the Monetary Policy Committee of the Reserve Bank of India has set the inflation target. Now 4% plus or minus 2, which means the inflation should be in the range of, let's say, 2 to 6%. 4% plus or minus 2. The inflation has to be within this range. The current inflation of 3.6% increases the likelihood of an RBI repo rate cut by 0.25%. Now please remember, when the repo rate is high, when the repo rate is high, which means it reduces the money supply, which means now the bank is saying that please park the money with us, we will give you more interest. We will give you more interest, which means, so people start, keeping the money with the bank, which means it is reducing money supply. And if the money supply is reduced, it also controls the inflation. Now this is basic concept of economy. And if the repo rate is less, which means the bank is giving very less interest, so people will prefer spending it elsewhere or investing it elsewhere. That is, now the money supply is increasing. When the money supply is increasing, which means now the bank, I do not have to, let's say, keep money with when it comes to lower repo rate. The banks have reduced the repo rate. They have reduced the repo rate, let's say, by 0.25%, or let's say by 0.5%, which means now there is more money available in the market. More money available in the market, which means this will boost growth. Why? Because if I have money, I will, let's say, spend on, let's say, various things. This will boost growth. This will boost growth. Now, what are the macroeconomic and social economic inflation or implication of this retail inflation? The first one is impact on economic growth and policy. Impact on economic growth and policy. Now, lower inflation, right, as the retail inflation has fallen down, it will boost the consumer purchasing power, which means it leads to economic stability and sustained growth. However, prolonged deflation, that is reduction in prices. If there is prolonged deflation in essential commodities, this may indicate weak demand, which means there is no demand in the market, which is not good for the market or which is not good for the economy. This will also signal potential economic slowdown. That's the reason the policymakers must closely monitor the food prices, the global commodity trends, and rural demand to ensure balanced inflation control and the expansion of the economy, right? The next one is the factors affecting the food inflation in India. Which are the factors? They're influenced by weather patterns such as, let's say, droughts, floods, heat waves, which directly impacts the agriculture production. The supply chain disruption, let's say, because of transportation issues, because of, let's say, storage issues, this contributes to the volatility of the prices. Additionally, the global commodity prices, Russia-Ukraine war, it plays a crucial role in determining the domestic food inflation trends, which affects the affordability and also stability of the market, right? Then the inflation and its impact on the socio-economic policies. Now, inflation significantly, it impacts the social welfare programs. It also impacts the wage negotiations, the fiscal policy, subsidy allocations. As a reason, the governments must carefully balance inflation control with economic growth to ensure fiscal stability while also safeguarding the purchasing power of the vulnerable populations like the SC, ST, OBCs, women, etc. This is the impact on the socio-economic policies. Right? I hope you understood the second topic as well. Now let us focus on the third topic, that is popularize fortified grain scheme, says standing committee. So we'll understand what is fortified rice. Now the standing committee, right, on Consumer Affairs, Food and Public Distribution has recommended that the central government intensify efforts to implement the distribution of fortified rice. Here's the context. Let us try to understand what is fortified rice. You know the grain of rice. This is rich in carbohydrate, which is macronutrient. So fortified rice, which means that we are enriching the grain with essential micronutrients, which means, let's say, essential micronutrients like iron, folic acid, vitamin B12 and vitamin A. These micronutrients are, let's say, integrated or injected in the rice grain to make it more nutritious. With the help of technology, we are actually using the rice grain, enriching the rice grain to make it more nutritious, to make it more nutritious. What is the purpose? To address the micronutrient deficiency. Now, Indians often lack in micronutrition like calcium, magnesium, iron, vitamin B12, vitamins, essential vitamins and minerals, right? And if this fortified rice will improve the overall public health. How? By reducing rates of anemia, stunting and other health programs. I hope you understood what is the fortified food program, which means you are, let's say, integrating essential micronutrients in the grain, in the rice grain. This makes the rice grain more nutritious. Now, what is the role of the standing committee? The role, key areas, schemes, please read by your own, right? Now, this is self-explanatory, so please read by your own. Now, let us try to understand the schemes integrating the fortified rice for nutritional. Which are the schemes that integrates the fortified rice for nutritional improvement? Now, see, the fortified rice, they're enriched with essential micronutrients. We have discussed which, like iron, vitamin B12, etc. etc. Now, various government schemes have incorporated, which means they have, let's say, added the fortified rice into their food distribution programs. Why? So that the nutritional intake enhances amongst the vulnerable section of the society, that is the pregnant women, children, the lactating mothers and people belonging to low income households, which means the purpose is that this fortified rice will be integrated with various government schemes, and these schemes, they distribute food among the poor people. The first one is National Food Security Act. Now, this act ensures access to subsidized food grains for over 800 million people. How? through the public distribution system, PDS system. Now, to improve the nutritional outcomes, the government has introduced fortified rice in the PDS, that is public distribution system. This provides what? Enhanced dietary benefits to economically weaker section, which means the poor people, they find it difficult to afford the nutritious rich food. So what the government is doing is they're actually distributing the fortified rice to the poor people, especially in states with high malnutrition and, let's say, uh, high poverty. The second one is the Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Anna Yojana. Now, this was actually launched during the COVID-19 pandemic. It provides free food grains including fortified rice. Now, this scheme was extended to support families facing economic distress and food insecurity. Right now, fortified rice that is included in the scheme will help combat malnutrition in our country. The next one is Integrated Child Development Services, what? ICDS. Now, this program is implemented by the Ministry of Women and Child Development. What it does is it provides nutritional support, health checkups, and preschool education to children under the age of 6, along with pregnant as well as lactating mothers. So again, the fortified rice is included in the supplementary nutritional program under this services. Why? To prevent stunted growth, undernourishment and anemia among the young children and women. Now, this intervention under the ICDS is very, very important to reduce the infant mortality rates, right? The next one is the midday meal scheme. Now this scheme, right? Now this scheme is currently a part of PM. It's part of the Pradhan Mantri Poshan Shakti Nirman. This aims to enhance the school enrollment, to increase the admissions, attendance, and nutrition. How? By providing hot cooked meals to children in the government and the government aided schools. So again, in this scheme, the fortified rice has been integrated into the school meals. Why? Because often the students were found having deficiency of iron and essential vitamins and minerals. And the deficiency of essential vitamins and minerals can can affect a child's ability, the cognitive ability, the ability to understand, perceive things, concentration, academic performances. So these are the schemes in which the fortified rice scheme has been integrated. I hope you understood the third topic as well. Now let us understand the fourth topic. Now, what is the context? The context is that there have been concerns surrounding the automated permanent academic account registry, that is APAAR ID, introduced by the Ministry of Education. So in this article, we'll focus more on the APAAR ID. Now first, now all these points are very, very important. Each and every point is important for your pre-examination. Please make sure that you remember each and every point. One, it is a 12-digit unique academic identity number. What? 12-digit unique academic identity number for who? For the school students. Which ministry? Ministry of Education. Which means it is a specialized identification system created for students across India starting from an early age. It is introduced as part of One Nation, One Student ID program. And this One Nation, One Student ID program is in alignment with the National Education Policy and National Credit and Qualification Framework. So again, it is self-explanatory. There is nothing much to explain. So please remember each and every point. So here, if you get to see this is automated permanent academic account. Right here, the name is mentioned, the date of birth is mentioned, the gender is mentioned, ministry is mentioned, and then here there is a barcode. Now, what is the aim? This system is designed to track academic progress from pre-primary to higher education system. How? By integrating the students' academic records into a centralized and accessible digital platform. This ensures efficient monitoring of educational progress while also reducing the paperwork and the administrative delays. The next is gateway to DigiLocker. Now we know what is DigiLocker. This APAAR ID, it allows students to store the academic documents like 10th certificate, 12th certificate through DigiLocker. This includes your report cards, certificates, exam results, and this provides a secure and paperless so that you can access and share your education record. Then unique student ID, which means that each student is assigned a unique ID. This is linked to the academic bank of credit. What? Academic bank of credit, right? Now this bank of credit, that is this digital repository records, right, which is owned throughout a student's educational journey. It makes it easier to track the learning milestones and also the credential of each and every student. Then it is voluntary, which means this registration is voluntary, ensuring that students and programs can opt on the basis of their preference. There is absolutely no compulsion. There is absolutely no compulsion, right? And what are the benefits? Educational progress monitoring, which essentially means that the government can use your ID to track key education metrics like the literacy rate, the dropout rate, then the performance of the students. This will enable data driven policy improvements in the education system. Then the authenticity of the records. Now, since only first party sources, that is the education institutions, are allowed to issue and deposit certificate into the system, the record remains authentic, which means it is tamper tamper proof. The next is seamless data transfers, which means if a student changes schools, their academic records stored in the academic bank of credit can be effortlessly transferred to the new institution by sharing the same or by sharing the APAAR ID. So these are some of the benefits of the APAAR ID. I hope you understood the fourth topic as well, the fifth topic, and these are some of the concerns. So please go through the concerns, right? It is again self-explanatory, can be easily understood. Next, Indian Railways to dig ponds under the government's mission Amrit Sarovar. So we'll understand about this mission, and question on missions are generally asked in the UPSC examination. So this is a the good topic and high chances that UPSC may ask a question on this topic. Now the railways is set to dig ponds under the government's mission Amrit Sarovar, right? So what is the purpose? To address the water scarcity, in India. Now the railways will construct new water bodies near railway sites, and this will be done in coordination with district authorities and rural development ministry. Now all these points are important for the examination. One, launched in the year 2022, that is National Panchayati Raj Day, April 24. This Amrit Sarovar mission is part of Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav, that is the 75th year of India's independence, right? Nodal ministry is the Ministry of Rural Development. Objective, to construct new or rejuvenate, that is, uh, make the dead pond lively. Rejuvenate at least 75 Amrit Sarovars per district across all states and union territories. Each and every point is important. Problem to address the water scarcity. To promote community participation, that is Jan Bhagidar, that is participation of the people and climate resilience. So this is the objective. Now this mission is multi-ministerial initiative. See, the nodal ministry is the Ministry of Rural Development, but it is a multi-ministerial initiative, which means all these departments and ministers are involved in the implementation of the mission Amrit Sarovar. And then these are the technical partners. So this is again under part of Ministry of Electronics and IT. So these are the stakeholders. And then the convergence model, which means it utilizes funds. Mission Amrit Sarovar, it utilizes funds from various schemes. For example, we have Manarega, then Pradhan Mantri Krishi Sanchay Yojana, 15th Finance Commission, Pradhan Mantri Kisan Sampada Yojana, and then CSR funds and NGOs are encouraged to participate as well, which means there is no dedicated, or let's say a separate allocation of funds for this mission. This mission will utilize funds allocated for different government schemes. For example, midday meals, the Manarega scheme. So these are the schemes from where the money will be utilized for construction or rejuvenation of the Sarovar, that is ponds. Why? To address the water scarcity issue. This is the fifth topic. I hope you understood. So each and every dimension of this topic becomes very important for the prelims examination. Now let us try to practice or solve few questions. And this you can again read by your own. The Human Development Index has long been used as a benchmark for assessing national progress. However, its failure to account for environmental sustainability has led to concerns about its validity as a true measure of development. Critically analyze the limitations of HDI and suggest alternative approaches that integrate ecological sustainability. Now, the question may seem very big, but if you read the question is very simple, right? So start the answer. In the introduction, first define what is HD and its key parameters, that is life expectancy, education. Then the criticism, why we need to move away from the HDI. Then give a slight reference to the the alternative model for the HDI, that is PHDI model that we already have discussed. Then what are the limitations of HDI? Please focus on this, right? Then discuss the alternative approach, that is the PHDI model, right? And these are some other indices or indexes that we can explore. We can replace the HDI with these indexes, indicators, and then talking about India. So what solution India may adopt? Should India adopt in the future to balance economic growth and environment sustainability? Right? Now, these are the questions from yesterday's DNA. Let us try to address these questions. With reference to International Criminal Code, consider the following statements. First, it is the world's first permanent international criminal code. Yes, this is 100% correct. It is governed by the Rome Statute. Yes, Rome Statute actually it facilitated the establishment of ICC. It is a specialized agency. No, it's not a specialized agency. It works in coordination with the UN, but it is not a specialized agency of the United Nations, which means this one is incorrect, this is correct, this is correct. Option A is the correct answer. Next, with reference to the or which of the following are examples of toponymous diseases, which means the diseases that are named after a geographical location. Now, the this the Spanish flu is named after a country, Spain. Ebola virus named after Ebola river. in Africa? Madura Fort, again named after Madurai city. Parkinson's is named after a person, that is James Parkinson. So this one is incorrect. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Option B is the correct answer for this question. Next, financial stability report in India is published by, very simple, straightforward question. It is the RBI. And then these are the questions asked from today's DNA, that is 1, 2, 3 and 4. So please try to attempt these questions, right? Attempt these questions. The link of the DNA quiz is mentioned in the comment section. So I please request you to open the link and try to address these questions. And please post your score in the comment section. On this note, I'll call it a wrap. Thank you so much for watching.